What if I told you that one American bomber group, the 100th Bomb Group, lost so many aircraft and crews during World War II that German fighter pilots specifically targeted them? Luftwaffe controllers called out their formation as priority targets, and they earned the nickname the Bloody Hundredth after losing 12 out of 13 planes in a single mission. That this group's losses were so catastrophic that replacement crews arriving in England would pray they'd be assigned to any unit except the 100th. Yet volunteers kept coming because serving with the Bloody Hundredth meant proving you were willing to face the worst odds in the war. That they lost 177 bombers in combat, more than any other heavy bomb group in the 8th Air Force, yet continued flying missions day after day, becoming either the unluckiest or the bravest unit in American military aviation. This is the story of the 100th Bomb Group, the unit that flew into hell repeatedly, that German pilots hunted specifically, and that somehow embodied both the horror and the determination of the air war over Europe. And the darkest part? They weren't actually unluckier than other groups, they just refused to break formation when under attack, making them easier targets because they believed abandoning their fellow crews was worse than dying. To understand the Bloody Hundredth, you must first understand the air war they fought. In 1942 to 1943, the United States Army Air Forces, USAAF, committed to daylight strategic bombing of Germany, attacking factories, refineries, rail yards, and industrial targets during daytime hours when targets could be accurately identified. This contrasted with British Bomber Command's approach of nighttime area bombing, carpet bombing German cities under cover of darkness. The American theory? The USAAF believed precision daylight bombing could destroy Germany's industrial capacity. Heavily armed B-17 flying fortresses could defend themselves without fighter escort. Flying in tight defensive formations would allow bombers to concentrate firepower against German fighters. Strategic bombing could win the war by destroying Germany's ability to produce weapons. The reality: the theory proved catastrophically wrong in practice. Problem 1. Fighters. German fighters had cannons and tactics specifically designed to destroy B-17S. They attacked from angles the bombers' guns couldn't cover effectively. Head-on passes, steep diving attacks from above, attacks from below. Problem 2. Flak. German anti-aircraft artillery, flak, was extensive and accurate. Flying in predictable formations at bombing altitude made B-17s perfect targets. Problem 3. Distance. Early in the war, American fighter escorts didn't have the range to accompany bombers to targets deep in Germany. Bombers flew unescorted for hours, helpless targets for German fighters. Problem 4. Weather. European weather made precision bombing difficult. Cloud cover obscured targets. Bomber formations got separated in storms. Ice formed on aircraft, making them heavy and unresponsive. The result? Horrific casualties. In 1943, bomber crews faced a brutal calculation. You were required to complete 25 missions to finish your tour and go home. Statistical analysis showed that only about 1 in 4 crews would survive 25 missions. This meant every time you took off, you had roughly a 10 to 15% chance of being shot down or killed that day. For comparison, infantry soldiers on D-Day faced approximately a 5% casualty rate on the first day. Bomber crews faced worse odds on every single mission, and the 100th Bomb Group faced the worst odds of all. The 100th Bomb Group was activated in June 1942 and deployed to Thorpe Abbotts Airfield in England in June 1943. The group consisted of 4 squadrons: 349th Bomb Squadron, 350th Bomb Squadron, 351st Bomb Squadron, 418th Bomb Squadron. Each squadron had approximately 9 to 12 B-17 flying fortresses for a total group strength of 36 to 48 bombers. The B-17 flying fortress, the B-17 was America's primary heavy bomber. Crew: 10 pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight engineer/top turret gunner, radio operator, ball turret gunner, 2 waist gunners, tail gunner. Armament: 13.50 caliber machine guns. Bomb load: 4,000 to 8,000 pounds. Service ceiling 35,000 feet. Range approximately 2,000 miles with bomb load. The B-17 was designed to be survivable, hence the name Flying Fortress. It had redundant systems, self-sealing fuel tanks, armor protection for crew positions, heavy defensive armament. But survivable didn't mean invulnerable. German 20mm and 30mm cannon shells could tear through the aircraft. Direct flak hits could destroy engines or blow off entire sections. Fighter attacks from dead zones, directly ahead, directly below, could kill crew members before they could return fire. The men, 100th Bomb Group crews, were mostly young, average age 20 to 22. They came from small-town America, farm boys, mechanics, college students. Every region and background, the bomber crews were genuinely diverse by 1940 standards. Volunteer service. Everyone in the group had volunteered for aviation duty. They'd trained for months. Pilots trained for 8 to 10 months. Navigators and bombardiers trained for similar periods. Gunners trained for several months. Then they arrived in England, formed into 10-man crews, and began flying combat missions over occupied Europe. The life expectancy of a new crew arriving in 1943. Approximately 11 missions before being shot down, killed, or captured. The 100th Bomb Group's reputation as unlucky began almost immediately. The early missions, June to August 1943. The group's first missions were relatively successful, attacking targets in occupied France with moderate losses. But in August 1943, the group began flying deep penetration raids into Germany itself, targeting aircraft factories, ball-bearing plants, and synthetic oil refineries. These missions meant 8 to 10 hours in the air, hours flying over German-occupied territory without fighter escort, concentrated German fighter opposition. Heavy flak over targets, losses mounted rapidly. The Regensburg-Schweinfurt mission, August 17, 1943. This mission became legendary as one of the bloodiest days in American aviation history. The plan? 230 B-17S from multiple bomb groups would attack ball-bearing factories in Schweinfurt. Another 146 B-17S, including the 100th Bomb Group, would attack the Messerschmitt aircraft factory in Regensburg, then continue to North Africa. The theory was that splitting the attack would divide German defenses. The reality, German fighters concentrated on each force separately. Weather delayed the Schweinfurt force, eliminating surprise. Fighter escorts ran out of fuel and had to turn back, leaving bombers unprotected. The 100th Bomb Group faced catastrophic losses on the Regensburg leg. Of 21 B-17ES from the 100th that took off, only one returned to England. The others either crashed in North Africa, reaching their alternate destination but too damaged to return, were shot down over Germany, or crash-landed in neutral territory. Casualties. Over 100 airmen killed or captured from the 100th alone. The Munich mission, October 3, 1943. Less than 2 months later, the 100th flew a mission to bomb Munich. Results. 12 out of 13 aircraft from the 100th Bomb Group were shot down. Only one aircraft, piloted by Robert Rosie Rosenthal, returned. Casualties. Approximately 100 to 120 more airmen lost. This mission cemented the Bloody 100th nickname. Losing 12 out of 13 planes in a single mission was unprecedented, even by the brutal standards of 1943. The Münster mission, October 10, 1943. 1 week after Munich, the group flew another mission, to Münster, Germany. Again, catastrophic losses. Multiple aircraft shot down, several more damaged beyond repair. The group's strength was being systematically destroyed. By mid-October 1943, the 100th Bomb Group had been effectively destroyed twice. Nearly all of its original crews had been killed, captured, or evacuated due to wounds. Replacement crews arrived, formed up, and began the cycle again. The question that haunted everyone was, why was the 100th Bomb Group losing so many aircraft? Theory 1. Bad luck. Some believe the group was simply unlucky. Random chance meant some units suffered disproportionately. Statistical analysis of combat losses does show variance. Some units will naturally suffer more than others due to chance alone. But the 100th's losses exceeded what probability alone could explain. Theory 2. Tactical position bomb groups flew in formation, with different groups occupying different positions. Lead groups flew in front, slightly better survival, they struck first before German fighters could organize. High groups flew above, vulnerable but could see attacks coming. Low groups flew below and behind. Worst position, German fighters would attack after passing through other formations. The 100th often flew in the low group position, the most vulnerable position in the combat box formation. This certainly contributed to higher losses, but other groups in similar positions didn't suffer equivalent casualties. Theory 3. Visibility. The 100th Bomb Group's aircraft had distinctive markings: a large square D on the tail, specific paint schemes on some aircraft, formation patterns that experienced German fighter pilots could recognize. There's evidence that German fighter controllers specifically called out the 100th's formations and directed fighters to attack them preferentially. One captured German fighter pilot reportedly stated, "We always tried to find the 100th. They were easier to break up than other groups." Why would they be easier to break up? This leads to the most controversial theory. Theory 4. Tactical doctrine holding formation. The 100th Bomb Group, more than other groups, insisted on maintaining tight formation under attack. The defensive formation theory held that bombers should stay close together, concentrating their defensive fire to drive off German fighters. But when under severe attack, some groups would spread out to make harder targets, take evasive action, break formation temporarily to avoid concentrated fighter attacks. The 100th Group leadership, particularly Major Harry Crosby, the group navigator, and Colonel Robert Kelly, group commander early in the deployment, emphasized that crews must never break formation, no matter what. This created a horrible dilemma for crews. Staying in formation made you a better target, but breaking formation meant abandoning your fellow crews, leaving them vulnerable. The group's ethos was, "We don't abandon each other." German fighter pilots recognized this. They learned that if they concentrated attacks on the 100th, the group would maintain formation even as planes were being shot down, making them easier targets than groups that would spread out defensively. So the 100th's higher losses came partly from their own doctrine. They chose to die together rather than break formation and increase their individual survival chances. Despite the horrific losses, the 100th Bomb Group developed an extraordinary culture and produced remarkable individuals. Robert Rosie Rosenthal. Rosenthal was a pilot who became legendary within the group. On the Munich mission where 12 of 13 planes were shot down, Rosenthal was piloting the one that returned. His aircraft, Rosie's Riveters, was heavily damaged. Engines out, hydraulics shot, fuselage riddled with holes. But Rosenthal kept it flying and brought his crew home. He volunteered to fly additional missions beyond the required 25, eventually completing 52 combat missions, more than any other pilot in the 100th. He survived the war, became a lawyer, and prosecuted Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg. Harry Crosby. Crosby was the group's navigator and later its operations officer. He was responsible for planning missions and briefing crews. His memoir, A Wing and a Prayer, provides one of the most detailed and honest accounts of the Bomber War, describing the fear, the losses, the moral complexity of strategic bombing, and the psychological toll. Crosby described watching crews take off and not return, writing condolence letters to families, processing replacement crews who'd be dead within weeks. He completed his tour and survived but carried the psychological scars for the rest of his life. John Bucky Egan. Major John Egan was one of the group's squadron commanders, charismatic, aggressive, and beloved by his crews. Egan flew numerous missions, survived multiple near-death experiences, and became the embodiment of the group's fighting spirit. He was eventually shot down over Germany in October 1943, survived the crash, and spent the rest of the war as a POW. He survived imprisonment and returned home after the war. Gale Buck Cleaven. Another squadron commander, Cleaven was known as quieter and more thoughtful than Egan, but equally courageous. He was also shot down in October 1943, became a POW, and survived until liberation. The friendship between Egan and Cleaven, contrasting personalities united by shared experiences, became one of the group's defining relationships. The mechanics and ground crews. Often forgotten are the ground crews who maintained the aircraft. They worked through English winters in unheated hangars. They repaired aircraft with massive battle damage, often working all night to get planes ready for the next morning's mission. They watched crews they'd befriended take off and not return. They painted kill markings on aircraft and far more often removed names of crews who'd been shot down. Some ground crew members volunteered to fly as gunners when crews were shorthanded, despite having no requirement to do so. By early 1944, the strategic bombing campaign was in crisis. Losses were unsustainable. German fighter opposition was increasing. The Schweinfurt-Regensburg raids had shown that unescorted daylight bombing deep into Germany was suicidal. Something had to change. The P-51 Mustang. In late 1943 and early 1944, the P-51 Mustang fighter entered service in numbers. The P-51 had range to escort bombers all the way to targets in Germany and back, performance equal to or better than German fighters, drop tanks that could be jettisoned when empty, extending range even further. For the first time, American bombers could have fighter escort for entire missions. The impact was immediate and dramatic. German fighters now had to fight through American escorts to reach the bombers. Bomber losses dropped significantly. German fighter losses increased as P-51s shot them down. Big week. February 20th to 25th, 1944. A coordinated series of missions targeted German aircraft production facilities. The 100th Bomb Group participated, but this time with full fighter escort. Results. Targets were heavily damaged. German fighter production was disrupted. Bomber losses, while still significant, were lower than previous deep penetration raids. German fighters suffered unsustainable losses. The strategic bombing campaign had turned a corner. It was still dangerous, but it was no longer suicidal. The 100th's continued service. Even with fighter escorts and declining losses, the 100th Bomb Group continued to fly dangerous missions. D-Day support, bombing coastal defenses, attacking V-weapon sites, targeting synthetic oil refineries, supporting ground forces during the Battle of the Bulge. The group's reputation meant they were often assigned difficult targets. Planners knew the 100th would complete the mission, regardless of opposition. By war's end in May 1945, the 100th Bomb Group had flown 306 combat missions, lost 177 bombers in combat, highest of any heavy bomb group, lost 785 airmen killed in action, earned 2 Distinguished Unit citations, produced numerous individual Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, and Silver Star recipients. The Bloody 100th story raises important questions about courage, tactics, and the cost of strategic bombing. Question 1. Was their tactical doctrine wrong? The insistence on maintaining tight formation despite heavy attacks increased casualties. This seems clear. Other groups that allowed more flexible responses to attacks had lower loss rates. But breaking formation also meant abandoning other crews to concentrated attacks? Individual aircraft were more vulnerable when isolated. The psychological impact of every crew for themselves undermined unit cohesion. The 100th chose cohesion and mutual support over individual survival. This was courageous but costly. Question 2. Were their losses worth it? Strategic bombing's effectiveness remains debated. Arguments that it was effective. It forced Germany to divert resources to air defense. It destroyed industrial capacity. It degraded German ability to produce weapons and fuel. It demonstrated Allied air superiority arguments that it wasn't. German production actually increased through 1944 despite bombing. The resources devoted to strategic bombing might have been more effective in other uses. Civilian casualties were enormous. Many targets were rebuilt or production dispersed. The 100th's sacrifices were real regardless of strategic bombing's overall effectiveness, but whether those sacrifices achieved their intended purpose remains unclear. Question 3. What sustained them? Given the odds, why did crews continue flying? Several factors. Unit pride. The 100th's reputation meant crews felt they had to prove themselves worthy. Mutual obligation. You flew because your crew depended on you, and other crews depended on your aircraft. Lack of choice. Refusing to fly meant court-martial. Completing 25 missions was the only legitimate exit. Compartmentalization. Crews focused on the immediate mission, not the cumulative odds. Youth. Most were young enough to believe they'd personally survive despite statistics. Question 4. What's their legacy? The 100th Bomb Group demonstrated extraordinary courage in the face of horrific odds, the human cost of strategic warfare, the importance of tactical flexibility, their doctrine's rigidity increased losses. The power of unit cohesion and identity. They became legendary not because they were the best bomb group, but because they suffered the most and refused to quit. Today, you can visit the 100th Bomb Group Memorial Museum at the former Thorpe Abbotts Airfield in England. The museum preserves the group's history, artifacts, aircraft parts, photographs, and most importantly, the names of the 785 airmen who died flying from that base. Walking through the museum, you see faces of young men, 19, 20, 22 years old, in crew photographs. Most of those photographs have one or more men circled or marked, indicating they didn't survive. Some entire crews are circled. They took off one morning and never came back. The 100th Bomb Group wasn't the most successful heavy bomb group in the 8th Air Force. They didn't have the best bombing accuracy or the most targets destroyed. What they had was this: the worst luck and the most determination. They flew 306 missions. They lost 177 bombers. They buried 785 airmen. And every morning when the mission board went up, showing the 100th was flying, replacement crews would groan and veterans would set their jaws and everyone would walk to their aircraft, knowing the odds and flying anyway. Why? Because their crews depended on them. Because abandoning the formation meant abandoning your brothers. Because the group's reputation demanded it. Because quitting wasn't an option. There's a photograph from 1943 showing a formation of B-17S from the 100th Bomb Group. The photograph was taken from another bomber in the formation. You can see aircraft flying in tight formation, gun turrets scanning for German fighters, contrails streaming behind the bombers at altitude. The English Channel far below. The photograph is beautiful in a terrible way. A formation of deadly machines flying in perfect precision toward targets where people will die. 3 of the aircraft visible in that photograph didn't return from the mission. The photographer's aircraft was shot down 2 missions later. But the photograph survived. And it shows what the bloody 100th was. Young men in fragile aircraft flying in tight formation because they believed staying together was more important than staying alive. They were wrong about a lot of things. Their tactical doctrine got people killed unnecessarily. Their faith in the B-17's invulnerability was misplaced. Their belief that strategic bombing alone could win the war was naive. But they were right about one thing. Courage isn't about surviving. It's about continuing when survival seems impossible. The 100th Bomb Group continued. Mission after mission, loss after loss, replacement crew after replacement crew. They earned their bloody nickname. They earned their reputation. They earned their place in history. Not as the best, but as the ones who refused to quit. If this story moved you, if it made you think about courage and sacrifice, about tactical doctrine and strategic effectiveness, about the young men who flew into hell repeatedly because their brothers were flying beside them, hit that subscribe button. The bloody 100th deserves to be remembered. Not for winning, but for refusing to lose. Even when losing meant dying.